Varka showing up in Node Krai never felt like a simple patrol. The way he steps out of the shadows near Star Sand Shoal after tailing Rerir by the cave that sits close to the traveler's crash site tells you that he isn't exactly there just for a casual chat, and neither is Rerir. Both of them being near our ship might just be coincidence, sure, but the bigger pull seems to be somewhere else. Lake Amsvartnir, the hidden Seelie court that only appears at night, and the location of the theorized first Seelie herself, Nicole Reyn, or Koitar. If you follow the trail of stories, artifact lore and item lore, and the old songs and stories around Node Krai and Mondstadt, it points to Varka pushing toward the edge of the Dark Sea so he can break into the Seelie Kingdom and bring back Nicole's true Seelie body. That is, if she already has one. Hey guys, what's up? Aru, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this video, along with some details about the Voyager and the Seelie Kingdom, and why Boreas himself is such an important figure to both Mondstadt, Node Krai, and the Abyss, as well as a look into the Dark Sea where the Seelie Kingdom is, the origins of the Snowland Fae, and why they're such a highly regarded, but also terrifying and revelational race that could destroy the heavenly principles within Snezhnaya even today. So let's get started. The very first sin of humanity and the Seelie goes back thousands of years ago in Hyperborea, the Golden City, and to an angel named Koitar. In that age, Seelie wore shining crowns that were not only symbols of power, but also acted as chains that tie them to the heavens' rules, the heavenly principles' rules. At some point, a Voyager came through, which I can only pronounce as Sotervoinen, a Voyager who had seen too much to accept the world as it is. In his little journey to the underground, he met the very first Seelie, Koitar, who was found under the ground and chained up. He and Koitar talked about a lot of forbidden things that would anger the heavenly principles if he had heard. Why knowledge had been called a sin, why the sky hid so much, and that conversation awakened something in the first Seelie. Koitar's crown, which once had told her how to act, felt less like a responsible power and more like a prison to bind her will. At this point, this is where she shared how to create the Snowland Fae, which is of course, as we know, a sin against the creation of life, something only the shade of life Boreas was supposed to do. The more pressing matter is Koitar's revelation that these Snowland Fae could level the gods and usher an era where mortals walk among gods equally. This is how strong she felt about the Snowland Fae, and is how powerful someone like Flins could get, or any other Fae for that matter, if given the right opportunities, which seems to be something that the principals did not like. The rest was either a true romance novel or an allegorical secret hidden behind a love story, and the three Moon Sisters were there to witness it. So it's worth considering that this divine matrimony between a pseudo-descender and the very first Seelie, who we can only refer to as a mirror image of Lucifer, isn't exactly what it's supposed to be. That and the heaven itself answered right after. Celestial nails fell, Hyperborea was first burned and then flooded and then wiped. Koitar, the very first Seelie who rebelled against Celestia, was cursed to live on without a name and a form, which if you've noticed is exactly how Nicole is. And the other Seelies or angels were also cursed with deteriorating memories and form related to if they ever fell in love, while the Voyager's memories were erased completely. Now what this Golden City had crafted and envisioned in secret and in love were face spirits made from fallen frost moonlight and the bones of giant beasts, the Snowland Fae, that could vary from looking like Paimon to looking like real humans and maybe even looking like this. Now the Snowland Fae were supposedly going to be the ones to reach the level of gods, but fell apart after the Belyet Tsar died 500 years ago. Most of the Fae in Snezhnaya are political figures and often hold themselves in high regard and influence in Snezhnaya's main city, Snezhnograd, so you can expect Flins to have noble origins compared to his current Ratniki life as a backstory, as well as the very potential of these Fae to stand on the level of or against Celestia themselves. But all of that was sealed away and never to be remembered, much like everything else the heavenly principles decides to call forbidden these days. And that includes the Seelie Kingdom, now sealed within a mirror underneath a lake. Water is the mirror where the sky tells its secrets, and a lake that reflects the night sky reveals the secret of the Seelie Kingdom in Node Krai. Node Krai heavily highlights reflections of the moons not just in our conquest through Rerir and the Moon's Reflection, but through multiple world quests like Moonweaver's Dawn, the mirroring power of positive and negative energy of Kuvaki within Node Krai, and the many mirror puzzles that show moon reflections when you complete them. But this also connects Rerir more than you think, and his colors alone reflect a bloodline similar to Arlecchino and Perrin hairy. The Crimson Moon Dynasty once chased truths in upside-down reflections, false skies that showed real signs, hanging upside down from an Irminsul tree and unveiling the truth of the world in that manner. Upside-down cities and reversed statues of the Seven like this makes more sense now too. They're looking for the air quotes truth of the world. Something to add is that lunar semblances can be obtained through lunar mirrors by the Frost Moon Scions, as we can see in Lauma's meetup quest. So a Crimson Moon's reflection, rather a Crimson Moon semblance, can be found in a similar reflection once you fall into the water. And Lake Amsvartnir is that kind of place, which is why both Rerir and Varka need it. People say that if you break a golden branch in the sacred tree around Lake Amsvartnir, you'll end up stepping into the Seelie Court. By day, it's just a normal lake, but at night, the court shows through the surface of the water like a parallel world, a mirror world. And inside, there is an abandoned hall, the abandoned wasteland hall of the Seelies. The way lore items describe it, you can still hear a young woman's song echoing through those rooms. And it's as if there's still someone there, singing and waiting for something to help her. Another piece of lore talks about the golden strings that control the world and its people's lives. A harp in the sky that angels once used to pull lines of fate tight. A string and aura that only Melazine and Aranara can notice on every person, including Paimon. When you put this all together, Amsvartnir is a doorway to the kingdom that held those strings, the Seelie Kingdom, and the strings they once plucked and pulled to play the world's fate. And the heavenly principles wrote history on those strings like a harp playing a song, quite similar to the rule that Remus once had, but this time it's far more effective, and it wouldn't be Remus talking to the heavenly principles, but the Seelies being commanded by the heavenly principles himself. This lake is the one place the writing shows through. I'm sure you already know the relevance of musical string instruments have in writing and controlling histories. From the Moon Sisters themselves, the Welkin Moon Song and Prophecy, Venti's allegorical stories, as well as songs being representative of actual lore. Venti's allegorical stories is often a song accompanied by a harp, but what's more important is that the main theme of Genshin, once you open the game, is a song and a harp. The main theme is also accompanied by a harp, and it's a song of one of the Moon Sisters, Dream Aria. So is that song created by the heavenly principles for the moons, or is it created by the Seelie in her lonely abandoned hall? Originally, Seelies had silver wings and with thin coronas that carry 7 colors like the faint rainbow. Nicole Reyn is not like that at all, and in official art and scenes, she wears a golden crown with golden wings, but her eyes shine like tiny stars. This is not a Seelie's normal silver. This is the Primordial One's gold mark to see you and control your fate, your every move. The same palette that paints Hyperborea in its angelic shackles, the god's limit celestial aura, and the very strings that every Teyvatian has on their heads like a tracking device. Even visions are golden, and add to that, every time a kingdom tries to reach godhood or Primordial One levels of ascension was always colored in gold. And of course, every instance of that golden vision fell to ruin, almost like an orchestrated result using a single color. Now, if you accept that little theory, then Nicole's current body isn't her true Seelie self. Honestly, I don't even think she has a body, but this one is different. It's a bound form marked and discolored by the Primordial One's order. Silver is supposed to be her true color, the same color of the moons, the Seelies, and the moon wheels that aren't the same as golden visions. The crown on her head works exactly like those old angel crowns, a tool and a chain in one. It's basically a marker that says this is the Primordial One's power, and this character here is his property. But the Star Silver eyes say different. This is still Nicole, but you just need to free her. The rainbow and silver that should be there are already gone, covered by a new color that belongs to a higher power that I don't even think is theirs to begin with. I'm not saying that the Primordial One doesn't have powers, but he might have stolen another power from a certain flying dragon who's now dead underneath Tevat. That's why saving Nicole's real body isn't just about saving a friend. It means taking the golden mark off of the first Seelie curse and cutting off the original lock that that turn the loving angels into wandering lights that often lead us into chests. Alice is a good friend of Nicole, and the Hexen Circle are a tight-knit group that can read, cross, and even create borders that most people can't even see or comprehend. And Nicole is the guide that never gets lost, because not only can she predict the future, but read people's fates. The deadly fate or future that she realized long ago was that humans could walk among the gods. That basically means that humans can, in fact, reach the Primordial Ones level, which is what started the Seelie Rebellion in the first place and why Koitar, as well as Hyperborea or Nicole, had to be sealed. Now, Mondstadt's wolves remember this tale, even if most people forgot. The Moonlit Bamboo Forest book recounts that only wolves remember the fall of the Moon Sisters and the Seelie era. And now it seems less about these abyss wolves and more like the wolf Boreas himself and his pack remembering that era. So Boreas might have actually came from Snezhnaya and Hyperborea and now ended up here. The Drunkard's Tale volumes talk about a lone wolf wandering into Wolvendom, then farther still crossing into a grey palace in a wasteland beyond the nations, the Dark Sea. Inside, he finds a pale maiden with a lute, which is the first and the last living Seelie. Her song is soft but heavy, and she calls it the Seelie Song, a tune that her people once called to sing for savages, which is to say the early humans, but now it's the lament of the Seelie themselves, and the fall from grace that they were punished with, as well as the revelation of the future that she once found out, of which happened to each and every Seelie that we've met within the game, by the way. Later, that wolf, Boreas, the North Wind, tells this story to a drunk from Mondstadt, which is likely Varka after their short fight. If you think about it in the Hexen Circle's perspective, Mondstadt has carried the romantic story of the Seelie and the Voyager in its stories of freedom and romance for a very long time, but never really knew about it, which makes you wonder if Venti actually remembered the story of Nicole and the very first rebellion of the Seelies in Hyperborea long ago. It makes sense that the one to follow the song again is also a wolf who wears a knight's armor, Varka, the Knight of Boreas. Now, Krai is where all of this finally meets. And as we've seen already, this Knight of Boreas is after the moon and is right in the middle of Krai, heading straight for Lake Amsvartnir. Krai is where all of this finally meets, and we were given information about Varka and the Seelie right as we entered the flagship tavern. The traveler hears about Varka leaving the flagship with his knights after Demian mentions trouble at Lake Amsvartnir. And at the end of the quest, we see him later shadowing Rerir near Star Sand Shoal. Without the intention of apprehending, let alone killing him, he's just there for a drink and a chat, and more importantly, to convey and exchange information. A lot of people talk about the wild hunt in the region, but it's almost like white noise meant to hide the real motive. Rerir's pursuit of his body was one goal, using the wild hunt, but his main mission has always been the moon, which is why he ended up in the moon's reflection in the first place and, well, created the wild hunt. And Varka's trail, which keeps circling back to the lake and the court underneath, might just be the compromise for both of them to achieve their goals. Who's to say that the moon's reflection is also sealed beneath Lake Amsvartnir, where it's a lake reflecting the sky, which in itself can only be found at night where it reflects the sky, likely when the moon is shining on it. An inverted kingdom sealed within a lake's reflection might also hold fragments of the moon's reflection, regardless of which moon it is. And if we're to make a guess, it could also be the reflection of the iridescent moon. If you've done any single puzzle from the Frost Moon Scions, you'll know that connecting mirror images together creates a single moon. So, there might just be a moon underneath that lake, and it might just be the exact same reflection of the moon that is found when the iridescent moon sank underneath the water. Now, a question that you might be asking is why now and not long ago? Why wait until Krai is at its most volatile? Well, to start, Rerir already did that 500 years ago and for some reason failed. But to understand this situation, we need to look at what happened with Durin, mini and real Durin by the way, and those strange attacks during Windbloom in 5.7. Varka, during that time, asked Barbatos to bring the witches together. The Hexen Circle met and something unnamed was agreed upon during the Tripartite Conference. place. On paper, it simply says that they'll help Mondstadt in times of need, and that time of need was to stop the attacks on Mondstadt by helping Albedo turn Durin into a human. In practice, rather, in exchange, it sounds like they gave Varka permission, tools, and a safe window to do something that no ordinary knight could do, which borders the impossible. And that's to open the way at Amsvartnir, slip a hand through that mirror, and start walking towards the place where Nicole's true body sleeps, or where her voice is singing. Add to that the fact that Albedo, Durin, and Alice is also going to be in Node Krai, be it by Alice's command or that Durin and Albedo for some reason also need the moon. All three of them are likely there to help Varka, and their mission together is to help free the Seelie and their good friend Nicole Reyn. If anyone could grease the path between a night lake and an angel's ruined hall, it's likely going to be these guys. But the place that they need to go to first to find Lake Amsvartnir and the Seelie Kingdom is found within a wasteland that doesn't belong to any archon or god. Which does make sense why Alice and the Hexen Circle know about places where rules of the Vat don't apply to. Judging by that, they're definitely going to the Dark Sea. Albedo and the Traveler have already experienced more than enough outside Tevat's shenanigans, and of course Durin is just a given at this point. Once we factor in the Dark Sea, then we see the bigger picture and how actually plausible this plan might work. The Dark Sea is not just a faraway ocean where anything not under the Seven lie, it's everything outside the Principles' set borders. In the words of Dainsleif, it's where the god's gaze does not fall. And in a place where the god's gaze does not fall, anything is possible. Yes, oh my gosh, we're still referring to that teaser even while we're in Node Krai. Anyway, fallen gods ran here after the Archon War, and most of them died unnamed as well. And Kanomiya is counted as Dark Sea territory even though it sits under Watatsumi, which shows that this is more about rule rather than actual map lines and borders. A certain location outside of the fake sky where the shades are sitting on might just also be a similar place where the god's gaze does not fall and where the shades can do their little pep talks without anyone hearing. Now, some people also argue that the Har Isles or the Golden Apple Archipelago as well as Conria belong in the same bucket for the same reason. The Primordial One does not care about this place, and nor does he even want to touch it. These are regions and kingdoms that have either lost the Primordial One's favor, or fallen kingdoms that have rebelled against them, or maybe even plots of land and sea that don't really matter much to the Primordial One and his rule. Anything that the Primordial One doesn't want inside of Tevat gets chucked into these places, which makes sense why parts of Mondstadt and multiple other regions ended up in the Har Isles. It's the trash heap outside of Tevat's rule. All of this also matches the idea that Lake Amsvartnir is a gate on the edge of Node Krai. If you pass through the forest and break a golden branch in that lake, then you step into the Seelie Court, at which point you are already in the Dark Sea right after that forest. But once you delve deeper into this sealed lake, into those empty palaces where the first Seelie's body might be kept, then it's just the same journey as Skirk's through the frozen wasteland to find the Voyager who married the Seelie, of which we already know the Voyager is actually the magical swordsman that Skirk is looking for. The Sinners know him, and most likely the Hexen Circle too. Lore tied to the Spindle Loot Catalyst, the new event item, talks about the first Seelie's revelation in detail compared to what we've seen in the artifact sets. This more detailed revelation tells the story of apostles fighting in a sky tower similar to the Spiral Abyss, beasts and monsters that are bigger than mountains breaking free from the earth, which points to the sovereign dragons claiming their authority, along with 3 moons shining up in space, which is supposedly when the 3 moons were free, and the Dragon King himself, Nibelung, lifting itself like a tide. This might be the same tide that flooded Node Krai long ago, which means that Nibelung could be underneath the water trying to break free. This is the last look at the Elysium that they envisioned, but sadly this revelation never actually happened, or rather it did happen, it's just that nobody ever remembered, or nobody was made to remember because of those strings. Those golden strings that control everything in Tevat, even history. Buried and forgotten by the same god that shackled everything, including her and her formless prison. Now, if you follow the story of the Voyager and the first Seelie marriage, as well as the relation of the moons, it's quite tempting to ask if that soul of the Voyager shows up again as Varka without any memories. Boreas, whose tales were actually about the old Elysium in Hyperborea that we now find out, the drunkard Varka who leaves Mondstadt under an agreement with the Hexen Circle, with these two together, it would fit the entire storyline of Node Krai perfectly, as well as add another perspective to the truths of the past compared to the usual Moon Sisters Marrow lore and Columbina. The Snowland Fae ties this whole thing back to the north, where Hyperborea once stood, and not only that, it also ties to the Crimson Moon Dynasty's habit of finding real answers in reflections that look fake. This is why moons matter so much in this current Archon quest, why Varka is after the Seelie Kingdom, and why Rerir is after the moon as well. But what about for someone like Nicole? Well, let's just say that the Moon Sisters witnessing her wedding isn't just so they can take selfies. There's a message here on why these three Moon Sisters are there to witness a wedding between the Voyager and the Seelie. And it's also why Nicole is here looking for the moons as well. And it's to do something for the moons after she becomes free. When the sky is flipped upside down in the water and the Seelie are finally freed, then the last piece of the puzzle left is the moons. After that, well, the only thing left is to wonder what the Shades would do and maybe fight the Heavenly Principles. Maybe the seal breaks open, maybe the golden strings of the Primordial One fight back, but if this gate really opens, it won't just be the wolves and Seelie stepping through. We might see people like Flins crossing that border as well, with Lauma watching from the edge and the Snowland Fae finally choosing if they'll sing or stand. And we'll pick this up next time and see where the trail points to once we actually know more about why Lake Amsvartnir is the target for Varka and what exactly Rerir is going to be looking for now that he has his complete body. What price does this rescue demand, and who gets to write the last line of this song? But that's gonna be it for now. I'll see you guys in the next video, yeah? As always, like, comment if you enjoyed, subscribe and hit the bell for more of my ramblings, and stay mad theorists. Bye!